the Switch. Sure. I'll let you at least say stuff first. I didn't test the audio though, so I'm not 100% sure it's working right. Say stuff first. Presentation section. Everybody washed out. Are you about third, fourth? Yeah, right.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. Tonight we're going to have, first we're going to have Randy show off a game he's been working on called Maker. And then Neem is going to talk about battling unconscious bias by being a cupcake in a donut world. I got the right nouns right? Okay, cool. So I guess we'll just get started with Randy. Randy, kick it off.
So, I've been working on this for around 2 months in my spare time. I don't think the audio is going to go through the system, so you might be able to hear it, maybe, from my laptop. The music's playing. The game's not. There. Maximize it. So I do have music and sound effects in, but you may not hear it. So right now it's connecting to the web and automatically downloading my test level. And that's why it's thinking. There it goes. Okay, so I'll just start with playing through the level a little. It takes a little while because it's resetting everything, so like the coin blocks and spinning coins and all that. It runs a lot faster on my desktop. And so the golden carrot lets you have double jump if you... And that's multiple coin block. And the slime can jump on. Invisible coin blocks. And that jumping is getting annoying. And then he can die. Except I'm not dying for some reason. So up here are the objects you can select from. This is the delete, so it deletes everything. Last night I got it working to where it only deletes the first thing that you're clicking on, so it doesn't delete everything until you drag over it again. So you can place tiles and they will automatically make, like this one has the grass on top, so if I fill there it makes it dirt. So it's a 9-sliced system, so it'll have rounded edges and stuff like that. There's regular coin blocks, and you can place things in it just by clicking on it like that. And then there's a 5-coin block, invisible coin block, and I actually have an exit for once, so you can finish the level. It doesn't like streaming and doing this all, so. Yeah, beat the level. So you can middle mouse drag to move around, as well as use arrow keys. And you can do, or you can place things while moving, so you can do really fast painting with it. And you can kill yourself with spikes. That'll actually work, I think. That's pretty much it. it is saving and loading to the web, so anyone that makes their own levels will be able to play other people's levels like Mario Maker. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Any questions or anything? Yeah.
How are you drawing the grid?
What?
How are you drawing the grid?
That's just a whole bunch of sprite tiles just created at when the level was made. Oh, I forgot. So I didn't have a power up, so I just died instantly. So I'm going to give myself a carrot here if I don't walk into the spikes directly after grabbing it. Any other questions while I'm doing this? Yeah.
Does the tile stuff use your existing tile framework that's out on the Unity store?
No, this is complete from scratch. This works better. Like I said, this system has the 9 slicing parts to it. You can also paint objects, so like coin blocks and stuff. If I wanted to make a pre-made coin block with a carrot in it instead of having to place the carrot, then it would automatically have a carrot in it then. Or placing slimes or turtle shells or whatever, you would just make the object and have it run regularly and then just drag it into a new one and it's just placeable almost instantly. Yeah.
Already looks like a more fluid tiling system than Maker.
It probably is. Seizure warning. Okay. There was another. Yeah.
What are you using for your back end?
What? Sorry.
What are you using for your back end? You said you got a surface layer back there?
So I'll have to play button again and show you the editor itself. So each tile is actually its own tile, and then I have several layers of different object types. So I have a tile type, which is like the background and the floor. Then I have blocks, which are like the item blocks, and then I have entities, which are things that can be placed in item blocks or that exist in the world, like the slime that walks around.
Oh, I'm sorry. I meant like you were saying earlier, it's making calls to say which tree you're above.
Oh, I'm just doing a call to a PHP script on my server,
Oh, okay.
and then it just sends a text string back.
Yeah,
I can actually show you the text string. So where the console went. Well, it should say the level here, but it's just empty for whatever reason.
Yeah.
It's just a text string that is delineated by a character that's holding the alt key and hitting 153, and that's it. Because I figure most people won't use that character, so it won't mess with things. Okay. Anything else? All right.
What are your plans long term?
To make a game. So I plan to make a single player part of the game so that, like, to teach you how the items work and stuff before you just go into online games. Because, like, you won't necessarily know what a golden carrot gets you. I might change it to be like night vision instead of double jumping, but at this point all the art and stuff is from art asset pack called Kenny Assets, and I just am using this placeholder stuff until I feel like actually working on art at some point maybe, or paying someone else to do it. But it works pretty good as is. And then this, I would probably make it to where when you click on the multiplayer, if you haven't played through the single player, it would warn you going, hey, you don't know what you're doing yet, play the single player.
So will you eventually put it on Steam, or like what's the...
Yeah, that'd be the end goal on Steam and such. I may make it to where the maker part, the actual tile placing and stuff, I may sell that as a Unity asset, so that, because this isn't limited to just a platformer, that's just what I made the character controller. You could easily make, say, a Zelda game where you can just paint the ground and it'll automatically add the walls around it and stuff like that.
And you can also just push it out as a web player thing as well.
Yeah. also thinking I might be able to, again, with the Zelda type thing, sell extra packs that would let you, say, the platformer is the base pack, and then you could have a DLC for $5 to have a top-down shooter pack or something like that. Anything else? Okay. Wow. I'll just go with this one. That'll work. Oh, wait, that won't work for the stream. Huh.
If you want me to be your effort, that's pretty far.
Sure.
I think there's actually,
You just get to be stream sectioned.
yeah. Is there a
What are you looking for?
I guess, could you want to use the mouse?
Sure.
Do you mind, you don't need to be plugged into HDMI to stream, right?
No, not to stream.
Okay, so we're going to switch this over if that's okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
You don't have audio, do you?
Do you want the mouse?
Yes.
Sorry, it's an audio? Yeah, is that okay?
Plug this in.
Okay, flip this.
Hi everyone. I'm your name is Sarah, and I'm going to talk to you about why cupcakes are really awesome compared to donuts. No, really. So I'm using cupcakes as an example of my bias because I'm really biased towards cupcakes, and I think they're vastly superior as breakfast foods than donuts. So really, I'm just hoping to get Wes to bring in some cupcakes one day for breakfast. But I'm a software developer at Asynchrony. Wes is my team lead. Kind of forced me to do this. I'm also the St. Louis Women Techmakers lead, which is just a group of women in technology in the area. And you can, tweet at me if you have any questions. But let's start off with a little bit of an example. Can everyone please close your eyes? Just play along. No one's going to steal your stuff, I think. Well, I'll watch and see if they do. So I want you to think about the first image that pops in your mind when I say a couple of different occupations. So what's the first thing that you think about when you're thinking of a pilot? A nurse, a teacher, a police officer, and a software developer. Okay, everyone can open their eyes. So for me, when I was doing this first time, when I thought about a software developer, I thought about my favorite team lead, sorry Wes, Helena, who's like this really big badass and like everything I want to be in as a software developer. But when I thought about a pilot, I think of this cartoony kind of pilot with a little pilot's hat because I don't think I know any pilots. And I've done this talk a couple of times and people have pointed out that I actually do know pilots, but I'm so like consciously biased towards thinking I don't know pilots that I can't think of these people when I think of pilots. But a lot of you probably thought of different images in your mind of either people that you knew, or maybe for a teacher, you probably thought of your favorite teacher potentially. It might have been somebody who was young and a female. It might have been an older professor that you knew. You might have tied an ethnicity to it. When I think of a police officer, I kind of think of a white guy as a police officer. When I think of a nurse, I always think of a girl. So you kind of have all these preconceptions of what you think about for different things, and you don't even realize it a lot of the time. And this all kind of plays into bias. So what is bias? Bias is just a prejudice in favor of one person, group, or thing over another person, group, or thing. And so scientists kind of disagree on how much information you take in at any given point in time. A lot of people say it's like over 100,000 bits of information. Nobody has any real idea. But what we do know is that you don't take in the majority of that information consciously. So right now I know that there's a huge group of people, but consciously what I'm thinking about is my fingertips are really, really cold because every time I go and speak in front of people, my fingers are just really cold. All the blood's like rushing in my brain right now, so that's what I think about. And so in general, we kind of take all of this information and we pattern match really, really fast. And that's where all of the information goes that we aren't consciously taking in. So right now I'm kind of thinking, okay, there's a bunch of dudes in this room. Like, that's my pattern matching that I'm doing. I recognize that you all have different hair colors, but I can't actually consciously tell you who has what hair color. And police officers hate this because when you witness a crime, you're not remembering all these details about people. It'd be great if you were, but you kind of don't because you're not really actively thinking about those things. So we take in all this information and we pattern match, but where does all of these patterns come from? They come from your background experiences, your cultural environment around you, the way that your parents think, things that have happened to you. So say if you got stung by a bee, you might be more afraid of bees in the long run. Or say you think that red cars are fast. It's not really factually based, but you know, you see that in a lot of the media, so then you start to think that red cars are going to be a lot faster. And so all of this bias is influenced by the world around you, and you can't really, you know, figure out how these things are influencing you. It just kind of happens, and so a big focus of this talk is kind of figuring out where are you biased and how can you start to remove that bias or just really be aware of it so it doesn't really influence your decisions around you. So there are two types of bias, unconscious bias and conscious bias. We're going to talk about unconscious bias, but conscious bias is me knowing that I'm super afraid of spiders, and if I see a spider, if I had to pick one thing in the world to kill off, I'd kill off spiders. Like, I am consciously aware that I would kill off spiders. Unconscious bias for me might be that I'm afraid of spiders because they have, probably not because they have 8 legs, but if I see something like an octopus with 8 legs, I might be unconsciously associating them with spiders and then be afraid of octopuses, and probably octopuses will go next in my order of killing things. But I'm not actually going to kill any of these things, sorry. Really shouldn't talk about killing in talks ever. Yeah, I get somebody else to kill a spider. And so, again, we're going to kind of focus on unconscious bias because the idea behind this is everyone probably has good intentions and are good people, and they aren't really aware that they're biased towards things. So I'm not going to say that conscious bias doesn't exist. Like, there's a lot of assholes out there, let's be real. And sometimes they say really mean things that they really shouldn't say to you, but we're not going to focus on that. We're going to talk about unconscious bias and how we don't even realize that we're doing biased things. So how do you figure out if you have bias? Especially when I said that you don't even realize you have all these unconscious biases. How are we going to figure that out? And so researchers at Harvard in the 90s created this test called the implicit association test. And over 5 million people have taken it, so I highly recommend everyone take it. It's pretty awesome. And so the idea behind this is it helps you figure out what patterns you have by making you pattern match a lot of things. In the first iteration of the test, they have a bunch of words, a bunch of good words like happy, joyful, can't think of happy words right now, and they have a bunch of bad words like sad, angry, rageful, and they make you go through and say, okay, this is a good word, this is a bad word, and then they give you a kind of a sense of like, you are this fast at pattern matching. The next thing that they do is, in this example, the bias that you could have is thin people versus fat people. So they'll show you a bunch of pictures and then have you categorize again. Like, okay, every time I see a thin person, I'm going to click a button on this side. Every time I see a fat person, I'm going to click a button on this side. And you go through and they figure out how fast you can pattern match. So the next 2 iterations of the test, they combine bad words in thin people and good words in fat people on either side and make you pattern match again, and then they flip those 2 things. And they see, is it easier for you to pattern match thin people and good words, or is it easier for you to pattern match thin people and bad words? And that kind of gives you an idea of how fast your brain pattern matches these categories together. So what they found was, through a lot of these tests, is that 70% of white people have a moderate bias towards white people, which makes sense, and 50% of black people also have a bias towards white people. And so the idea behind this is that a lot of minority groups have a preference towards the majority group because there's a lot of favorable things in culture towards that group. They also found that 76% of people have a preference for able-bodied people over disabled people, and 76% of people more associate men with careers and females with families. And so this isn't to say that if you are moderately biased towards anything, you're going to be acting on this bias. When I was putting together this talk in the first place, I took the test for Arab Americans versus European Americans, and I was kind of biased in which test I took because I was pretty sure that I wasn't going to be biased at all. I grew up going to a mosque in the St. Louis area, and my best friends were this trio of Palestinian refugees and like this half Pakistani, half Korean girl, a Somali immigrant, and someone from Texas. So like we were the rainbow. If you had a PBS special, like our pictures would be on it because we had everything. So when I took this test about Arab Americans versus European Americans, I was like, I'm not biased at all. If anything, I'm biased towards white people, or biased against white people. Like, pretty sure of that. But I actually was moderately biased towards Arab Americans, and my initial thought was, this test is bullshit. Like, no, this is wrong. They don't know me. This is totally wrong. And then I was talking to my grandpa about it, and he was just like, well, you know, when you see the news, what do you think? And I was thinking about it, and every time there's a shooting or a bombing or anything, I'm like, please, dear God, don't be another brown person. That's my initial thought. And I know it's a terrible thought to have, but like, that's the first thought I had. And I just kept internalizing and growing into this bigger thing. And I found that even when I was meeting new people, I had these biases towards people, even though I didn't have it when I was a child. And so this is kind of how your cultural environment can kind of shape the way that you are. So taking these tests, especially over time, can kind of show the shifts in your thought process and like how the environment around you is kind of changing you. And it was really hard, honestly, to kind of think about that and really try to like recognize that and not overcorrect and be like, oh, look, it's another brown person, I need to be super nice to them. Like, trying not to do that and just try to be normal. So I highly recommend taking any of these tests. They're really great, and they tell you a lot of interesting things about yourself. So we're going to talk about some terms around bias. But generally, we're going to talk about a lot of donuts and cupcakes. I'm really proud of these graphics. It's the first time I've ever drawn anything in my life, so don't diss them. But when we show any pictures about donuts, we're talking about an in-group. And an in-group is the group that you identify with. So this can be anything from they're the same age as you, they have the same occupation, they have the same skin color, any of these things, same socioeconomic background. Those are your in-group people. And when you meet another one of them, you're going to judge them based on their potential. So in your mind, you're like, hey, I'm pretty awesome. I went and I did a lot of awesome things in my life, and this person seems very similar to me, so they probably did similarly awesome things. I know that I'm likely to do awesome things in my future, so they are too. And so that's kind of the thought process behind when you meet an in-group person. An out-group, symbolized by the cupcake, is a group that you don't identify with. And again, this could be based on age, differences in cultural experiences, not watching the same movies, anything like that. And so when you meet that person, you don't really have that connection with them, and so you're going to kind of look for more things like, okay, what did you do in the past? Why are you worthy of this thing that I'm thinking about, like either my friendship or job? And you're going to kind of want to look for accomplishments that they had and try to see those things to figure out who they are and what they're likely to be and do. So everyone has a combination of different in-groups and out-groups. When I first gave this talk, I was really surprised. The CEO came up to me and he was like, you know, I have a lot of out-groups. And I was like, no, you don't. Except I didn't say that to him. But like, I was thinking like, no, you probably don't. And he was kind of saying like, yes, you know, I feel like I'm in an out-group for this, this, and this. And I was like, okay, everyone has different out-groups and in-groups, so you can't really judge people and kind of assume like, oh, you have all of these in-groups, you're in the majority for all of these reasons, because people feel left out for a lot of different reasons. The last term we're going to kind of go over is intersectionality, and that's just how all of these social constructs that we have kind of compound and interplay with each other. So say a young, good-looking dude probably has a lot more privileges than a disabled, elderly woman. So all of these things kind of compound on each other and give people different sets of privileges and takes away different things from them. So why do we care about bias? Like, if we all have bias, what's the big deal? We're all living our lives and we're all, well, maybe seemingly pretty happy. So if we're, especially here, if you're creating games, we live in this super interconnected world. The internet gave us all these connections to people, and so when we're creating products, we really want to try to create a product that will speak to the largest group of people. And so if you're biased towards one group or another, you're going to know about that pretty fast with the way that the internet is. An example of this is Snapchat doing a lot of anime filters and getting a lot of flack for that. They thought that they were, you know, biasing themselves towards a group that really liked anime, and they didn't realize that they were biasing against a different group of people. But also, the bias that you feel and other people feel around you kind of affect your commitment at work and your sense of belonging, and everywhere. It affects your sense of belonging in your friend group. When somebody says something biased and everyone's kind of silent about it, you're like, oh wow, my friends really don't care about that thing about me. And so you know, it comes into play every single day. But also, scientists have done a lot of studies to figure out, like, diverse teams actually tackle problems in better ways. They gave a homogeneous group a problem and a diverse group a problem, and they tried to see their interactions and how they worked. And what they found was a homogeneous group kind of starts to engage in groupthink, where somebody says something and everyone's like, yeah, it's an awesome idea, and they just keep going and they're funneling one way. But once you start introducing more and more diverse people, diversity of experience, experience level, anything like that, people stop engaging in groupthink and they start giving different ideas, and those different ideas can lead you to a better thing overall. But also, in general, you have a lot more team commitment. If you're working on a project with a bunch of friends, you have a lot more discretionary effort. People put in just a little bit more effort and they care about the thing more. Again, you have more collaboration and you have a higher intent to stay on any project in general because you're having a good time, you're having fun, and you're not thinking about the ways that you're feeling kind of bad and being biased against. So I want to talk a little bit and shift to talking about some data around bias. So what's the big deal about bias? If I introduce 1% bias in a system, what would actually be the results behind this? So scientists did a simulation where they had a pretend company. It had 8 levels. Level 8's like CEO kind of level. Level 1 is like your entry level, whatever. And so cupcakes can only get rated to 100%, and donuts could get rated to 101%. So really there's just 1% bias there. And who knows if, you know, a lot of donuts get rated 101%. They started off everyone at 50-50 at every level, and then whenever somebody was kind of dropped from one of the levels, like they quit or whatever, every single level had like 15% attrition, and they would backfill from the next level up. And so they ran the simulation 20 times, which really isn't a lot of times if you think about it. So I kind of want to know, does anyone have an idea of what happened over time, over 20 simulations? What they found was that you actually had a really significant skew, especially the higher up that you went. Because the more people who got, you know, just had a little bit more bias, ended up taking over 65% of level 8 versus the 50% that it was before. And so that was only over 20 simulations. And if you kind of look around, you can kind of see this in a lot of places where a lot of executive teams aren't really that diverse. And if you think about it, people who are hiring for executive teams are looking for people who are in their in-group. They're not intentionally doing so, but it just happens to be that they're more familiar with that. And so you kind of see the effect of it over time. But Well, why does this matter? If you're making games, why does this matter, right? You're not going around hiring people for CEO level positions, probably. So here's a real world example. In 2006, I want to say, the first iPhone came out, and the first YouTube app came out on the first iPhone, which is pretty awesome. But they found that 5 to 10% of YouTube videos were upside down. So does anyone have an idea why this would happen? Was it Brian?
They were left-handed.
Exactly. So it wasn't that the right-handed developers at YouTube were like, screw left-handed people, they can adapt to my ways. They could turn their phone upside down and, you know, take videos in a different way. And it wasn't that the testers were always like, yeah, sure, left-handed people exist, but we don't really care about them. It was more that you're just so biased. You're thinking about things in one way, and you're doing things over and over in the same way. You don't even think about other possibilities or opportunities. And this isn't the only example where we've seen this. The first set of airbags killed women and children because they used male test dummies. First voice recognition software only heard male voices. And nowadays, Facebook and Google Photos gets a lot of flack for this, but if you're darker than a certain shade, it doesn't recognize you as a person. So you'll see, so when I was tagging, I did not tag my photos for my wedding because there's a bazillion photos, but one of my friends was like, you know, I wasn't tagged in a single one of those photos and everyone else was, and we kind of looked at it and it was, if you're darker than a certain color, you just don't get tagged in any photos. And it's one of those things that you're like, well, that's not a big deal, Facebook's whatever, but it kind of is a big deal when everyone's hanging out and like having this shared experience and you're automatically not in the shared experience. And again, it's not like the developers are like, we don't care about this. It's more that when you have a lot of diverse test data, you start having more diverse solutions versus having test data that's all centered around the people who you're with or the people on your team. And so we kind of see this every day, and it's one of those things that you really have to think about because it turns people off so fast. And even there's a whole group of people that don't use Instagram because their filters are very good for certain shades of skin tones, but very bad if you have other shades of skin tones. And there's a whole slew of apps that actually will alter photos better if your skin tone's darker. And people with lighter skin tones don't even know they exist because they're like, everything's centered around me and it works and I look great in these photos. So it's one of those things that you kind of have to think about. It's a whole different world out there. And especially when you're making products for everyone in the world, you really don't want to accidentally exclude a large group of people. So I'm going to shift again and talk about some more data, but really the power of names. And this is really symbolic of just how ingrained our biases are. And so all of these next studies are really going to talk about just having one name versus another name and the effect that that has. So scientists took a bunch of identical resumes and they changed the name on top. And for half of the resumes they put male names and half of the resumes they put females' names. And again, these resumes are identical. Nobody knows these people. They don't know if they're in their in-group or out-group or anything. They just have this resume with a female name and a resume with a male name. And they gave it to a set of people and asked them, who would you recommend for hire? And so for every 8 male names, only 5 female names were recommended for hire. They took this out to the Chicago area and they actually sent out resumes to a whole bunch of companies and they found the same thing. And it's actually kind of shocking. People do this a lot where they change their name and send out the same resume to the same company and all of a sudden they get back different feedback. Like, oh yeah, you seem like you have a lot of potential versus, I think you need some more experience before you can get by, which is really kind of sad. I don't know. They also did this study with European sounding names like Brendan, Greg, Emily, and Anne versus African American sounding names, Tamika, Rashid, Tyrone, and Aisha, and they found similar results. So for every 6 people recommended for hire with a European sounding name, only 4 people were recommended for hire with an African American sounding name. And at the end of the day, this actually was the equivalent to 8 years of experience if you had a European sounding name. So if you think back on what I was telling you before, people in your in-group are judged on potential. So say you're a female with an African-American sounding name, and you don't have a job at all, so you have no experience. You're trying to get your first job. You have to put out 50% more resumes to even get on par with this. So you're putting a lot of extra effort to get your first job, and it's not like your name changes, right? To be fair, I changed my name. My little brother also changed his name because his name was Osama, and he was not getting anywhere with that name. But like, your name is so ingrained. People think all of these things about you from just a name. And so it's so hard, especially if you have the wrong name. You know, people are biased against you and they don't even realize that they're doing it. Like, we were looking at some resumes in my friend group just to kind of chat about this. And people were like, oh yeah, I wouldn't hire this person. I'm like, why? And they're like, I don't know, I don't like their name. Like, really? That's it? Like, you get so many thoughts based on a person's name, and so it really sucks. And if you think about intersectionality, having a female name and an African American sounding name, it all kind of compounds and you're less and less likely to be hired. The more shocking thing from the study for me was that if you had a European sounding name and a criminal background, you were more likely to be hired than having a Black or Latino name with no criminal background. So just think about that. Just based on your name, identical resume, but having a criminal background versus not, and having the right kind of name gets you a lot of places. And so it's pretty shocking. There's a lot of things that you can actually do about this. People say when you're looking at resumes or when you're meeting people to try to not think about their name and think about all the things that come with the name. There's a lot of different things that you can do to decouple this kind of bias, and we'll talk about this a little later. So let's talk about some of your daily interactions and the biases behind them. I really like broccoli. First time I had it, it was delicious, it was crisp, it was awesome. Talking about my first impression of broccoli, it was awesome. I will eat broccoli. Now, peas, no. They're unseasoned, they're soggy. If there are peas in any dish, I'm not gonna try them again. This is based on my first impression. And so we have similar first impressions with people. And we don't even realize it. When you meet a person for the first time, sometimes it's like the way that they're holding themselves or the way that they're shaking their head or the tone of voice that they're using can automatically make you not like a person. And so there was another study done where they asked people's first impressions based on a story. So they had a story of this venture capitalist who was trying to get some funding for this super cool startup in San Francisco, as usual. And on some of the stories, they put the name Howard, and on some of the stories, they put the name Heidi. And they asked people what their first impressions of these people were. Same exact story, and what they found was Howard was like super likable. You'd want to go and get a beer with him. He sounded like a cool guy to work for. But if Heidi was on this story, she was really selfish and a self-promoter. She was trying to get really far. She was probably, not the kind of person that you'd want to work for. She was probably bossy. And people just kind of thought all of these things, and this is their first impression of these people that they didn't know. They just read a story about them. And so we have that happen a lot, especially when you're meeting people for the first time. So it's one of the things I want you to think about the next time you meet someone for the first time. Because I know I met some people in the elevator and I was like super awkward. And so I was like, oh shoot, they're going to think that I'm really awkward. And me getting up on stage and hopefully not tripping is probably going to, confirm that for them. But it's one of those things that you kind of think about when you're meeting someone. But in our daily interactions, we have so many different places where we can be biased. I talked a little bit about gender bias, but also like race and ethnicity. People love to ask me when I learned how to speak English. I grew up here, well, I was born here, so it's just like a really awkward question. I'm like, you didn't ask that other person that we just met for the first time. With age, sometimes you have biases against older people. Sometimes you have biases against younger people. It really depends on the day and what you're talking about. Invisible illnesses is a huge topic that I don't think we talk about enough, but sometimes we judge people like, oh, I have enough energy to do this thing, or I don't find heights scary. Why can't they feel the same way? And so it's a really hard one to talk about because it's not like somebody broke their leg and you could see that, right? If somebody's depressed, you can't tell from looking at them. And so a lot of times we have these biases against people who are suffering from something because we can't see it, and we're just like, oh, that person's lazy. And it's really hard to talk about in general. The clothing that people wear, so this goes in a lot of different ways, but when you're at, say, a conference and people are giving out free t-shirts, it really sucks when they don't give a t-shirt out in your size. And so it hits the good middle ground, probably. But people who are smaller and people who are larger have a lot of problems. I was on a team where we all got team t-shirts, and 2 people were left out because of the size range. And so we took this big photo, and the person taking the photo was like, oh, why didn't you 2 wear those t-shirts? Like, what's wrong with you 2? And like really got mad at them, and they felt like shit, right? Because it's like, well, I feel awkward being like, I didn't fit in the t-shirts that you gave me and I'm not wearing it, and now you're yelling at me about it. And so it kind of, like I said, it affects your sense of belonging. Religion is so hard. I know I have problems where I accidentally say things that are like super anti-religion, and this goes both ways, where people say things that are too anti-religious or say things that are, condemning you to hell for not being the right religion. And so that one's a hard spectrum because people are on both sides of it and getting angry at each other and feeling like they aren't valued. Kids versus no kids. Sometimes you'll hear people say like, oh, I can't believe they're leaving work early again to pick up their kids, like what's the big deal? Or other people will be like, well, you don't have kids, why can't you stay late? It's not like you have any responsibilities. We're all busy. Like, kids or no kids, we're all busy. And this is a thing that plays a lot into different things where people don't think about how we all have responsibilities and priorities. I can probably go on and on about all of these. And the last one I'm going to touch is verbal slurs. We all say them and don't even realize, like the word gypped is really not cool for people who come from gypsy families, especially gypsy refugees. Indian give, I didn't know what that meant for a long time because my family's Bengali, but I thought Indian giving was like when somebody gives you a dish, you have to fill it up with food and give it back to them. That's not what it is. But like, it's another thing you should not say because a lot of Native American cultures like really have a hard time with it for good reason. So kind of be careful, especially when people call you out on verbal slurs. Stop laughing, Wes. Especially when people call you out on verbal slurs. Don't tell them like to chill out or not care about it because these are things that matter to people. So, former President George W. Bush dropped an awesome truth bomb, and I was really proud of him. And he said, too often we judge other groups by their worst examples while judging ourselves by our best intentions. And this is really true, because a lot of times I'll find myself being like, let's look over that thing. I have fond feelings towards them. And then finding like the worst example in this group and being like, no, this justifies me not liking, blue bears because they do weird things. I have no idea. This is a bad example. Anyways, you kind of want to think about this and think about how you're judging people in different groups and really seeing, do you have a homogenous, like, if you're looking at a group, are you looking at their worst example and being like, yeah, I don't like this group, they're all unsafe because of X person? Or are you looking at the group as a whole and seeing all of the accomplishments of that group as well as the bad things? So, quickly we're going to go over this of different biases that aren't like so black and white of like, oh, I'm biased against this race or, this age group. But really, how do you speak to people? Are you always going around being like, oh, I always question everything? Because I find that the people who say I always question everything are probably the most biased because they, in their minds, think that they're very objective. They don't have any biases, and so when something that doesn't, ring true to them, they question it. And they're like, yeah, I question everything. But they aren't recognizing that they don't question everything. So if something agrees with them, they're not questioning the truth behind that. And so you kind of have to think about this of like, well, how do you say those kinds of things? And when you are questioning things, are you questioning everything equally, or are you only questioning the things that you disagree with? Who's in your meetings, or who do you talk to? when you're going into a room for the first time, are you going and talking to the person that looks like you, or are you going to a person that looks new and different and talking to them? And this is something that we do all the time, especially like when you're at the grocery store. Are you chatting up all of the grocery store people equally, or are you only chatting up the people who look like you? I say this, and it sounds funny, but then I found myself not chatting up everyone equally. Somebody called me out on it, and I was like, oh wow, that's very, very true. So how do you attribute traits? And this one was an interesting one. I was talking to my husband, and he was just like, so do all Indian people veer to the left when walking towards you? When you're just about to like ram into each other, do they all veer to the left? Which I thought was like the dumbest thing in the world, because I was like, no, I don't think the sample set of 2 that you had happened to veer to the left. And so it made no sense to me, but in his mind, he was like, this is an Indian person thing. I saw 2 Indian people do this, and so it's an Indian person thing. And so you kind of have to think about it, like, are you attributing traits for no real reason other than like, oh, hey, I met this person who was Korean, and they did this thing. It's because they're Korean. Sometimes it's because they're weird. Like, we all have weird personalities. Like, a lot of people will be like, well, did you do that thing because you're like, you know, brown and foreign? Like, no, I'm just clumsy. Like, there's nothing behind it. So you kind of have to think about how you attribute traits. And then lastly, like, who do you look at when you speak? One of my friends, in all the interviews that she does, it drives her crazy when she'll ask a technical question to a guy, and he'll look at the other interviewer and answer the other interviewer. And she's like, no, that is a easy no for me. Like, I asked a question, you're not even looking at me. But also, like, in general, when somebody asks a really hard question, we all look at the person that we think knows the answer to it. And sometimes they don't know the answer, but like, you probably are looking at the smartest person like, oh yes, you will know the answer. And sometimes it's the person that you don't think about, and so this kind of shows your bias sometimes. It's kind of interesting. After somebody told me this, I started looking around, and on one of my previous teams, we always looked at the same guy, and he always felt a lot of pressure to answer the thing, even if he didn't know the answer, but pretend like he knew the answer. So that kind of shows a different way that we can be biased that's not really, you know, as black and white as like race and ethnicity. And lastly, we're going to go over apologizing, because I think this is actually the hardest thing. So this is a very lighthearted example. The donut is saying something not so nice to the cupcake, saying that cupcakes are too pretty to be a tasty dessert, which is not true. And the cupcake's, you know, kind of disappointed and sad about it. The ice cream cone is an innocent bystander, and we'll kind of go over all 3 of these roles. So the cupcake's probably thinking any of these things, and you guys have all been in this position before, right? You're either like really disappointed in the person, or you're worried that if you say something to the person, they're gonna like yell at you or like double down on their position, say even meaner things. Or maybe you're like me and you're super hopeful. You're like, that was a mean thing. Everyone knows that was a mean thing. Somebody else is going to say it's a mean thing. I have so much trust in the world. Somebody else is going to call this out and won't have to be me. Or you could be shocked and be like, dude, what the hell? That was not cool. Or well, that's also angry too, where you're like, that person's a jerk.
Or you say, this is the best Monday ever.
Well, okay, that was me today. I was very shocked at some of the things that were happening at work. But you can feel any of these things, right? Now, if you're the innocent bystander, the majority of the time, you're like, did something happen? Did anything happen? You're pretty, you know, oblivious to the world. You're probably not thinking about it. If it falls into your biases, you're not thinking about it. If you're like me, you're probably thinking about your next meal, so you're probably super unaware of the conversation. But there's a lot of things you could do here. You could say nothing, which is usually what happens. I'll be honest, I'm like the person who says nothing a lot of the time, and I hate myself afterwards for it. You can wait until later to say something to the person who was affected, and you can be like, oh hey, that was a really shitty thing that person did, haha, do you feel better now because I sort of apologized? Please don't do that. It never makes the person feel better. For me, it makes me just a little bit more annoyed that you feel better about yourself because you like fake apologize, and now like I extra feel a burden on me. Or third option is you can call it out immediately and tell the person that's not cool. It's the easiest way to do that, and be like, hey, that's not cool. don't call them out in a mean way where you're like, what the hell, you're an asshole too. And I'm really bad at pretending to call them out in a mean way because I'm really bad at doing it. But don't make the person feel worse about themselves, and don't go out and be like, you're a racist, and then they're gonna say something, you know, out of defense. So try to do it in a kind of calming manner where you're not escalating the conversation. Now, if you're the donut, if you're the person who's saying that, then you're probably thinking a lot of things. And like, this is me a lot of the time. So sometimes you honestly believe the statement that you said because that's all you've encountered. Like the thing with my husband and the 2 Indian people that veered left. He honestly believed this thing. I thought it was ridiculous, but he honestly believed it. A lot of times you're thinking, this is a funny joke. Or you just don't know that it's offensive. So a lot of times we all fall into any of these categories. And so what do? The first thing is like, don't be a jerk. Like, don't be like, oh, I'm sorry that it hurt your feelings, because that's not a real apology. Don't tell them to lighten up. Don't tell them that they shouldn't feel the way that they feel. Like, remember all of these things, and don't use the thing of like, everyone else found it funny, so you need to, you know, lighten up, because that's not cool. Like, if you were the person who was being affected, you wouldn't want any of these things said to you, so try not to do it to other people. But how do you apologize? And apologizing is really hard, and I'm really bad at it. So I'm saying this, being really bad at it. But I'm starting to ask people about, you know, sincerely asking them to explain to me why it was offensive. Because sometimes I really just don't know, and that kind of helps me break my biases and really think about the thing that I said. Or a lot of times I'll ask people to continue calling me out when I do this thing. So I got in trouble once for being really ageist on accident, and I asked that person to call me out every time that I said something ageist. And I'm still terribly ageist, and I'm trying really hard, but I'm getting better at it with time, and that's one of the things that you have to recognize with bias. It's like, you can't just turn off a switch and all of a sudden you're not biased. I wish you could. That would make the world so much better. But alas, you can't, so you can only incrementally improve over time. And so hopefully at the end of the day, somebody says that they're sorry and the other person says that it's okay. That's really like the solution that we want from everything. But sometimes it's not okay, and sometimes that's really fine. You don't have to immediately accept an apology if somebody says it, especially if they don't say it sincerely. So really recognize that sometimes you'll say an apology and that person will still need time to kind of work through their feelings and might not accept the apology, and that's okay. So I told you a lot of depressing stats and whatever. There's a lot of things that you can do, which is great. And these are all things that you start doing today. So the first thing that you can do is listen to people. So scientists have found if you just slow down and really listen to people, take in their words, stop thinking of the next thing that you're about to say, because that's my problem. I'm definitely thinking about the next thing I'm about to say. But like, if you listen to people, you slow down, you stop pattern matching so fast, and you really start breaking your biases. And acknowledge what people are saying is the truth. So don't say things like, I can't believe that, because even if you can believe it or you can't believe it or whatever, the other person hears, I can't believe that. And even if they know that you're being slightly sarcastic about it or whatever, they still feel like there's that little bit of like, oh, you don't believe me. This thing happened to me and you don't believe me. And so really start by saying like, yes, I heard you and I understand this thing happened and I'm sorry. Like, it's not that hard. You're not, you know, like responsible for it, but you're acknowledging that you've heard that the person was affected by something. You can challenge and counter stereotypes, and this is something that we see all the time, every day. And so this starts with the people who you're closest with, not fighting people on the internet, especially not on Facebook. Nobody's mind is changed by a Facebook battle. But the people around you, your family, they listen to you, they trust you, and those are the people that you can really change, especially when you do this in front of little kids, because little kids will see that you're standing up to people immediately. Their biases form early, and so you're breaking these biases early, and you're standing up to people and challenging the stereotypes, and it's really hard, and I do this a lot with my grandparents. And it sucks because, you know, it's just awkward and you don't want to have these awkward family meals, but you also don't want to keep perpetuating stereotypes over time. And they found that people who stay silent in family dinners, their kids start forming those same biases that they're not countering. You can also understand the impact of bias. We saw the stuff about having the wrong kind of name, but really just be aware that you're hurting other people. And we've all been vulnerable once, right? We've all had somebody say something mean and you felt bad about it. So really think about that and treat people like you'd want to be treated. You can become a scientist of your own behavior. I say this because I love science and I used to be a scientist in a different life. But think about when you're meeting people, think about your first reactions to them and start like sitting there when you're on the road instead of listening to the radio or a podcast. You're like, okay, I met this person and I think that they're gonna be bad at their job because they're old. Is it because they're old? You know, like start kind of figuring out like why you had this strong reaction and try to figure out if the reaction's justified or you really need to think about it. Assess your relationship with outgroups. So look in your friend circle. Who do you have in it? Are they different ages, different ethnicities, you know, different socioeconomic backgrounds? Really think about that. And I'm not saying like go find the first lesbian that you meet and be like, we need to be friends, I need to collect a lesbian in my group. Like, don't do that, but like have authentic relationships with people because you'll end up finding you have a lot more similar to them than you think you do. The one that I probably think is most important is checking the context of how you spread information. So we all do this. We all say these stories like, I went to the mall and this angry black woman was yelling at this poor girl. And so there's a lot of things that I played into here. When I said angry black woman, I probably triggered like 17 stereotypes in your mind where you're like, okay, that person was angry and irrational and had no reason for thinking this thing. That poor girl was probably this young white woman. Like, you probably thought all of these things, and I'm adding this information and playing off these biases unintentionally, completely unintentionally. Like, I'm thinking this is adding some context to the story, but really I'm playing off some other things and adding information that I don't really feel comfortable saying, you know, straightforward and out there, right? So really think about how you say stories. When you have a new person on your team, are you being like, hey, the new female software developer? Or are you saying like, oh, we have a new software developer, right? Like, why are you adding these adjectives? Do they make sense? Are you adding in some information? Are you taking it away? I realized that I was talking to somebody about a new female team lead that I had, and I was like, this is awesome, it's a female team lead, I'm so excited about this. And the other person was like dreading it, was like, oh God, we have a female team lead. And we were both coming at this from two different sides, and so it was weird like having to talk about it later on in a retro and kind of reconciling our feelings and figuring out like, why was I saying this adjective? Why was that person reacting to this adjective? And going back and forth. And then lastly, be an active bystander. We all see bias all around us. Just start calling it out in small ways. It's really hard, and I'm trying to be a little bit better about it, especially trying to be less passive aggressive about it and just straight up tell someone like, hey, you said this thing that made me uncomfortable, instead of like hating them from afar and like writing vague Facebook messages about them, which definitely do, I'm aware, and I should not do. But at the end of the day, we've all been a help to people and a harm to people. Let's just try to help more often. When you are calling out people, be really caring and remember that we're all kind of fragile human beings, and it hurts to be told that you're a bad person, and we're all kind of bad people. So just remember that and try to be really nice when you're calling people out. And then thank people when they do call people out, because it's really hard. I know that my heart races when I'm like about to say like, hey, you said that thing that wasn't okay. So really keep perpetuating it. And in general, keep an open mind and keep learning, and we'll all kind of get closer to a better world if we all start to think about it. That's it. I take any questions. Question.
One of the things I like about your speech is the part that after you've offended somebody, one of the things you can do is you can ask them, how was this offended? How did I go about that? I honestly believe that biases are natural. Absolutely everyone has it, whether you know it or not. But I think the thing is that biases, it's based upon what we know from interacting with people. You know, different types of races. I mean, for instance, the reason why you might be more compelled to go talk to somebody who's white who's a lot like you, is because you know a lot about that information. But that being said, questioning everything is not necessarily a bad thing, as long as you question everything.
Yep.
Because the thing is that we only have a set limit of information. As you question the people, why are they doing what they're doing, me, why I'm doing what I'm doing, is to learn more information. And I think that that's pretty much the thing. I mean, I'm not really worried about the biases that I have if I can stand up and say, well, I can't find a good reason as to why I have a problem with this person, so I'm going to keep an open mind, or I'm going to go and talk to that person because I find something else that they're doing that's interesting.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, definitely.
So a couple slides back, you had the good examples of being hired based upon it. Is there like a demographic of like in certain parts of the United States you see more of this, or when you're doing some of your research?
Yeah, so they've done a lot of studies in, so the idea that a lot of people had was that San Francisco has no bias anymore because there's so many people, and what they found is that the averages are very similar to everywhere else. And even like different companies will be like, yeah, you know, we are based in Silicon Valley or San Francisco, and we have, you know, we're not biased at all. We do a lot of training, and there's still a long way to go, what they found. And it's across like all occupations and everything. I think there's one large company in the United States, like larger than 200 people, that actually has like a 50-50 gender split for software developers. And that's it. There's just one. So people are very shocked by this. They're like, no, it should be a lot better. And it's just not. Yeah, different places have different biases towards different groups. So like my friend who worked in the Atlanta office for Google versus the Denver office said that the demographics were vastly different. But there are still a lot of biases in the kind of hiring process that they had to get over and acknowledge in different places.
So even within the same company in different parts of the United States, you
Yeah.
see different biases pop up.
Even so like for Google's hiring in Atlanta, they emphasize a lot. They're like, yeah, you know, you're in the South, like these are the things you need to think about. And then say in Denver or San Francisco, they're like, okay, you're in these places, these are the things that you need to potentially overlook or get past, like different things with drugs or different things with age or whatever. So it's kind of interesting how they kind of target people to tell them what biases not to have in a biased way. It's weird.
It's interesting. Did you
Yeah.
ever find larger companies that even though the demographic might have an impact on the biases, that the company itself was kind of somehow, you know, didn't matter where they were at, kind of, I don't know, establishing a bias even from a company standpoint, even though they were so aggressive?
I don't know. I guess I didn't really look into that side of it as much. Yeah. But yeah, there's like Google and Facebook both put out their bias training for everyone to see. And like Google's one is really awesome. It has tons and tons of resources behind it. And I definitely recommend like looking into it because it goes into a lot of details about like different things that they've tried and different ways that have worked and not worked. Like those diversity videos that they make you watch in different companies, they find that that actually makes people more biased than taking away bias, which is terrible and great at the same time. But yeah, there's a lot of different ways that people have found that work, like having small discussion groups around it and really doing things as a team to figure out your biases in a safer environment than like a very anonymous, like watch a video kind of thing. Yeah. Brian?
So, let's say I've had a bad day and I'm pissed off, and I say something, or I'm pissed off, so I'm pissed off, and I say something offensive to somebody hurtful,
Yep.
and they bring it up, but I don't respond well. Like I say one of those things
Yeah.
where I'm like, just get over it, blah, blah, whatever.
Yeah.
Like, what could I do later? So it's not just like done. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. This is something that actually pops up a lot in my life, and so people have apologized to me 5 years after the fact, and the fact that they have made a good intentioned effort and have tried to mend that relationship does a lot for me. And so really bringing it up and being like, look, at that point in time in my life, I was, you know, in a bad mood or not as receptive to listening to it, but I've thought about it a lot and I'm sincerely apologizing and I really hope to mend that relationship. That for me works a lot, and like I have a lot of friends who I never thought I would be friends with ever again because of that. But then they've said things like, I'm so sorry I did this thing. And so depending on the person and really just trying to engage with them and have a real conversation and not keep making excuses for yourself, I think that's the hardest thing, because that's where I get sort of annoyed, where people are like, well, I mean, at the time, and blah, 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 and you could have done, and it's like, are you really apologizing, or are you still digging a hole here? So really try to think about that and just keep an open mind and listen and not keep defending and defending. That just doesn't end well, in my opinion.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Saw this in the video games. You had mentioned something about more in video games.
Yep.
Something about the left-handed YouTube thing.
Yep.
So I remember reading this about VR. Apparently, VR sickness, 70% of the people that get VR sickness is women, and that's not
Yep.
because women are different than men. It's because most of the people developing VR stuff is from men. So when they tune it toward things in that way.
Yep.
Well, since there's studies showing that women actually perceive death differently.
Yeah.
So when men are developing all these things without any female opinion, it's probably going to make a woman motion sick because she perceives it differently, and that becomes most apparent in VR.
Yeah. Yeah, there's actually been a lot of interesting studies about VR in particular, of just like differences in height and body mass and whatever, and all of the things and how they interplay with each other. Which has been
Any biases within the platform as a developer? As, for example, when I develop a game, you have familiar with so that one always versus maybe another platform that other developers might be interested in as a resource.
Could not tell you. Good question though. Yeah. I'm sure there was a lot of things. It's interesting because there was a lot of talk about like when Google Glass came out and how like all of the development towards that wasn't anything. So Google does a lot of stuff for like people in third world countries, right? And they really emphasize that, and Google Glass was one of the breakaways from that because nobody would ever be able to afford it. And so what they saw was like all of the apps were skewed towards people who had a lot of money, and you could, you know, it would enhance their life in that way. And then like apps that were helpful for different socioeconomic backgrounds were just like non-existent. So I guess there's a little bit of that kind of bias and really just like starting it in the first place. Google Cardboard, on the other hand, was wildly successful in third world countries and still is today, and is really awesome, and I like would love to work on that because I think they're doing a great thing with that. I'm just gonna step away right now.
Well, I have another.
Okay.
So, let's say you overhear about a situation and you're stuck in the middle of like two people's biases when they view what situation occurred. You have to make a decision about that situation. How do you assess like who is right and wrong when you have to make an actual like tangible decision going forward? Because it's like, you know, you have biases, but you can also see the biases on the other side, and it's like and nothing's actually happened, but there's like but you've got to make a decision.
Yeah, that one's like the hardest. I totally understand that because it's like, because you feel like you're objective, right? You're like, I see this person's biases and I see this person's biases, and then it's hard to even recognize your own biases and how they're interplaying and how you perceive both sides of it. And so like, I make a lot of lists and try to like play devil's advocate on myself, and I can't even do that effectively because I don't even know all the ways that I could be biased in that. Personally, I talk it through with a lot of people, and I'm like, okay, you are the bluntest person in my life. Like, tell me how far off base I am with this situation. It's hard though. I don't have a good solution. I wish I did. Make my life a lot better. I don't know. What do you think, Wes?
I want to ask a question. I don't know. Yeah.
That's hard though.
I think it's really hard.
Yeah.
And so, okay, here's what I think.
Yeah.
I don't think it's the right answer, but I think you assume the best of people
Yeah.
and move forward knowing that like people are generally good.
Yeah. And
But that's also like could screw you real bad.
yeah, I generally try to do that. It's just, it's really hard sometimes when you're like telling somebody, you're like, okay, this thing happened. They're like, oh, that person had good intentions. And you're like, okay, this thing happened again. That person had good intentions. You're like, how many times do I have to say this? I know that they've never said anything sexist towards you because you're a dude, but, you know, so I don't really have a good idea of what to do other than like, I guess being more aware of it just to see. So in a lot of situations, sometimes someone will say something really biased and nobody will say anything about it, and it's not because they don't care or whatever. A lot of times they're just unaware that it was biased. And so after the fact, when somebody's telling you, hey, this thing's biased, then you're more aware of it. And so the next time when you're in a conversation, you're more likely to pick up, oh, this biased thing was said than you were the first time. And so that's a better way of being like, oh, okay, this actually is a pattern. Like, the first time I didn't hear it, whatever. The second time, I was more aware and more primed to hear it.
Cool. Thank you, Neem. That was super good. Okay, I have a couple of announcements. We haven't pinned down exactly who the speakers will be, but we're planning an event for next month here. And I think there's like a million cool ways we could brand it, but it's basically going all in, stories of how companies that have shipped successful games and like became a company, like how they turned that corner and actually started doing it and deciding to make a go of it. I think that'll be good. I think part of the reason for that is because like we saw Randy's game and we see a lot of games here that we only see here when they demo it. And we want to get people to like don't take stupid risks, but we want to get people to when they see the spark of something that could be something bigger, to like be more willing to get other people involved and like don't get down on yourself, like actually turn it into something. So yeah, we're gonna find people to do that and then do it. If you want to talk about that next month, come talk to me. And then the other thing we have that is pretty important. So we started doing, this is not it. We started doing on every third Thursday? Every last Thursday, do you want to talk about it? Every last Thursday of the month, there's a drink and draw at Orbit Pinball Lounge. So if you are an artist or want to become one, you should come to Orbit on the last Thursday of the month and Orbit Pinball Lounge and draw some stuff with some fellow game developers. Starts at 7. Cool. Yeah. And the thing that's kind of important, on Friday we have the Science Center First Fridays. If anyone wants to demo a game there, we do not have a lot of signups this month, and we need to get, we would like to like make that a regular thing. To do that, we have to justify its existence and us like getting that space reserved. So if you want to demo a game, like it's less than a week away, please sign up and go there on Friday and show your game off. You get a ton of feedback. Do you want to? Can you talk to the experience?
Yeah, my company, we do it quite a bit. The Science Center is fantastic. They're really championing the local development community. But the best part about the Science Center, speaking of unconscious bias, is you get a lot of people who are not gamers playing your game. You get a lot of people who are don't necessarily have a preconceived notion about what your game is, going in whether it's an RPG or for a shooter or mobile or platform. So it's really nice to see this vast audience of play audience to sell a game to, as it's a free download. But it's a great place to get a bunch of people from very, very background to play your game. And the Science Center is just fantastic, and it's a great way just to kind of get in and meet the people who are there organizing things. And then also, 2 weeks from now, one of the reasons the signups are not as big this week is there's the SciFest Game On event, which is all day Saturday. So there's free developers signed up for that. But that is another thing going on that you can check out. Meet other local devs.
Well, I want to say, like, I've done a First Friday thing.
Yeah.
And it's also just really, really cool to see people play your game. Like, it's just awesome. Even if they're confused, they don't understand what's going on, they fall through floors and reveal bugs or whatever. Just like, see, like, I will never forget the first little kid who was playing the game, just picked it up and started playing, like, didn't want it, like, their parents were like, oh, we gotta go, like, they want to keep playing. Like, it's just, it's so much fun. It's so good for motivation, right? 'Cause I don't know about you guys, but, like, for me, I go, like, up and down like this. And so, like, when my motivation is down like this, and it happens to coincide with the First Friday we did, which is awesome, then it goes right back up, which is really great, like, to keep working. So, I might like to do that.
Yeah. So do you know what the topic is on Friday? I meant to research
No.
it.
It might be Hunger Games.
Oh yeah,
Okay,
it's
Hunger Games.
It's Hunger Games.
Yeah, so and that also makes a difference depending on what the theme is. Like for my company, we have an RPG called Battlefield. Like so, Anime Night is fantastic for us because it's absolutely our audience. But just in general, people are really excited to see new things. We're really excited to see local developers, people making things in St. Louis. People just aren't even aware that there is such a big local dev scene. So.
What kind of people do you think show up to the Hunger Games? Just kidding. I'm just testing your bias. All right. Well, I think we're gonna go then. Thank you guys for coming out, and the ladies. I was just saying people. And yeah, we hope to see you next time. And thank you to Riot for hosting. We don't have a date, and we keep like it'll happen. I need to find it. Yeah.